Emmeline Pankhurst, born on July 15, 1858, died on June 14, 1928, was an English political activist. She is best remembered for organising the UK suffragette movement and helping women win the right to vote. In 1999, Time named her as one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century, stating that she shaped an idea of objects for our time and shook society into a new pattern from which there could be no going back. She was widely criticized for her militant tactics, and historians disagree about their effectiveness, but her work is recognized as a crucial element in achieving women's suffrage in the United Kingdom. Born in the Moss Side district of Manchester to politically active parents, Pankhurst was introduced at the age of 14 to the women's suffrage movement. She founded and became involved with the Women's Franchise League, which advocated suffrage for both married and unmarried women. When that organization broke apart, she tried to join the left-leaning Independent Labour Party through her friendship with socialist Keir Hardie, but was initially refused membership by the local branch on account of her sex. While working as a poor law guardian, she was shocked at the harsh conditions she encountered in Manchester's workhouses. In 1903, Pankhurst founded the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, an all-women suffrage advocacy organization dedicated to deeds, not words. The group identified as independent from, and often in opposition to, political parties. It became known for physical confrontations. Its members smashed windows and assaulted police officers. Pankhurst, her daughters, and other WSPU activists received repeated prison sentences, where they staged hunger strikes to secure better conditions, and were often force-fed. As Pankhurst's eldest daughter Christabel took leadership of the WSPU, antagonism between the group and the government grew. Eventually the group adopted arson as a tactic, and more moderate organizations spoke out against the Pankhurst family. In 1913, several prominent individuals left the WSPU, among them Pankhurst's younger daughters, Adela and Sylvia. Emmeline was so furious that she gave Adela a ticket, £20, and a letter of introduction to a suffragette in Australia, and firmly insisted that she emigrate. Adela complied, and the family rift was never healed. Sylvia became a socialist. With the advent of the First World War, Emmeline and Christabel called an immediate halt to the militant terrorism in support of the British government's stand against the German peril. Emmeline organized and led a massive procession called the Women's Right to Serve demonstration, to illustrate women's contribution to the war effort. Emmeline and Christabel urged women to aid industrial production and encouraged young men to fight, becoming prominent figures in the White Feather movement. In 1918, the Representation of the People Act granted votes to all men over the age of 21 and women over the age of 30. This discrepancy was intended to ensure that men did not become minority voters as a consequence of the huge number of deaths suffered during the First World War. She transformed the WSPU machinery into the Women's Party, which was dedicated to promoting women's equality in public life. In her later years, she became concerned with what she perceived as a menace posed by Bolshevism and joined the Conservative Party. She was selected as the Conservative candidate for Whitechapel and St. George's in 1927. She died on June 14, 1928, only weeks before the Conservative government's Representation of the People, Equal Franchise Act 1928 extended the vote to all women over 21 years of age on July 2, 1928. She was commemorated 2 years later with a statue in Victoria Tower Gardens, next to the Houses of Parliament. Legacy. News of Emmeline Pankhurst's death was announced around the country, and extensively in North America. Her funeral service on June 18, 1928 was filled with her former WSPU colleagues and those who had worked beside her in various capacities. The Daily Mail described the procession as like a dead general in the midst of a mourning army. Women wore WSPU sashes and ribbons, and the organization's flag was carried alongside the Union flag. Christabel and Sylvia appeared together at the service, the latter with her child. Adela did not attend. Press coverage around the world recognized her tireless work on behalf of women's right to vote, even if they did not agree on the value of her contributions. The New York Herald Tribune called her the most remarkable political and social agitator of the early part of the 20th century and the supreme protagonist of the campaign for the electoral enfranchisement of women. Shortly after the funeral, one of Pankhurst's bodyguards from her WSPU days, Catherine Marshall, began raising funds for a memorial statue. In spring 1930 her efforts bore fruit, and on 6 March her statue in Victoria Tower Gardens, next to and gesturing towards the Houses of Parliament, was unveiled. A crowd of radicals, former suffragettes, and national dignitaries gathered as former Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin presented the memorial to the public. In his address, Baldwin declared, "I say with no fear of contradiction, that whatever view posterity may take, Mrs. Pankhurst has won for herself a niche in the Temple of Fame which will last for all time." Sylvia was the only Pankhurst daughter in attendance. Christabel, touring North America, sent a telegram which was read aloud. While planning the agenda for the day, Marshall had intentionally excluded Sylvia, who in her opinion had hastened Pankhurst's death. Historic England listed the statue as Grade 2 on February 5, 1970. A proposal to move the statue of Pankhurst away from the Houses of Parliament to the private Regent's University London and Regent's Park was submitted to Westminster City Council Planning Department in July 2018 by former Conservative MP Sir Neil Thorne. This proposal was withdrawn in September 2018 after widespread anger and a public campaign against it. The planning application received 896 comments, 887 of them objections. A 38 degrees petition against the removal of the statue attracted 180,839 signatures. The curator's office at the Palace of Westminster commissioned a report into the plan to remove the statue. Published on August 22, 2018, it concluded the memorial to Emmeline and Christabel Pankhurst is of high significance, which is not fully recognized through its listing at Grade 2. An application has been made to Historic England to upgrade the memorial to Grade 2. This is based on it having more than special interest, in terms of its unique history, its artistic quality, and the importance of its setting next to the Houses of Parliament. This proposal to move the memorial from Victoria Tower Gardens to Regent's Park would cause substantial harm to the significance of the memorial, as well as harm to the Westminster Abbey and Parliament Square conservation are. The proposal to move the memorial, therefore, should not be granted planning permission or listed building consent. During the 20th century, Emmeline Pankhurst's value to the movement for women's suffrage was debated passionately, and no consensus was achieved. Her daughters Sylvia and Christabel weighed in with books, scornful and laudatory respectively, about their time in the struggle. Sylvia's 1931 book The Suffrage Movement describes her mother's political shift at the start of the First World War as the beginning of a betrayal of her family, especially her father, and the movement. It set the tone for much of the socialist and activist history written about the WSPU and particularly solidified Emmeline Pankhurst's reputation as an unreasonable autocrat. Christabel's Unshackled, The Story of How We Won the Vote, released in 1959, paints her mother as generous and selfless to a fault, offering herself completely to the most noble causes. It provided a sympathetic counterpart to Sylvia's attacks and continued the polarized discussion. Detached and objective assessment has rarely been a part of Pankhurst scholarship. Statue of Emmeline Pankhurst in St. Peter's Square in Manchester, her hometown. Recent biographies show that historians differ about whether Emmeline Pankhurst's militancy helped or hurt the movement. However, there is general agreement that the WSPU raised public awareness of the movement in ways that proved essential. Baldwin compared her to Martin Luther and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, individuals who were not the sum total of the movements in which they took part, but who nevertheless played crucial roles in struggles of social and political reform. In the case of Pankhurst, this reform took place in both intentional and unintentional ways. By defying the roles of wife and mother as the docile companion, Pankhurst paved the way for feminists who would later decry her support for empire and sustainable social values. In 1987, one of her homes in Manchester was opened as the Pankers Centre, an all-women gathering space and museum. In 2002, Pankhurst was placed at number 27 in the BBC's poll of the 100 Greatest Britons. In 2006, a blue plaque for Pankhurst and her daughter, Christabel, was placed by English Heritage at 50 Clarendon Road, Notting Hill, London W113 AD, Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, where they had lived. In January 2016, following a public vote, it was announced that a statue of Emmeline Pankhurst by Hazel Reeves would be unveiled in Manchester in 2019. making her the first woman to be honored with a statue in the city since Queen Victoria more than 100 years ago. This, in fact, happened on December 14, 2018, 100 years after British women were first able to vote in the 1918 United Kingdom general election. Her name and image and those of 58 other women's suffrage supporters, including her daughters, are etched on the plinth of the statue of Millicent Fawcett in Parliament Square, London, that was unveiled in 2018. One of the houses at Wellacre Academy in Manchester is named after her. Helen Pankhurst, the great-granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst and the granddaughter of Sylvia Pankhurst, works for women's rights. Along with her daughter, she founded Olympic Suffragettes, which campaigns on a number of women's rights issues. Pankhurst has appeared in several works of popular culture. In the 1974 BBC television miniseries Shoulder to Shoulder, Pankhurst is played by Sean Phillips. In the 2015 film Suffragette, Pankhurst is played by Meryl Streep. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel.